Underground. 2.5 hours later. We got through. After a full 2.5 hours, the agents led by Natasha Romanoff finally opened a one-person wide hole. This time, the agents learned the trick. They first threw a flash bomb on it, and immediately threw a smoke bomb after the flash bomb exploded. Quick. Let's take advantage of this gap to rush up. Natasha Romanoff took the lead, holding the shield at the front. Hawkeye held a bow and arrow in his hand, and followed closely behind Natasha Romanoff. The cooperation between the two had a seamless feeling. Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye walked out wearing protective goggles, and after searching around, they ordered into the headset. You can come out now, and leave a team guarding in the cave to prevent it from being discovered by Joker's people. The others grouped in twos, touched from behind, and cleared out those people next to the sewer. After clearing out those people, start to gradually clean up from the bottom to the top. The targets here are all allowed to be killed. The agents moved quickly, and finally Hill's team stayed at the bottom. After finishing all this, Natasha Romanoff said in the headset again, "Director, now I request to use a signal jammer to block the signal here, since Joker can let people control the screen in Times Square. Maybe there is a way to hear our conversation." Received. The signal jammer has been activated, and you still have 2 hours. After Fury finished speaking, a humming, electric current sound came from everyone's headsets. Natasha Romanoff pulled the headset off her ears, looked at the agents behind her and finally said, "Now, everyone starts to act. Hawkeye, we don't care about the bottom, just break out from the stairs on the far right. If I'm not wrong, Joker must be in one of the 2 eyes of the Statue of Liberty now." When the Statue of Liberty was built, the inside of the 2 eyes were opened, so there is no need to send another team. The 2 of them cooperated very well. If there were other agents at this time, there might be some mistakes. So no one questioned Natasha Romanoff's decision. The 2 walked up quickly. At a height of more than 30 floors, Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye encountered a total of 3 gun battles. The first 2 shootouts were okay, they picked up some weapons. But in the third round of the gun battle, all the ammunition on their bodies and the ammunition picked up from the corpses just now had been exhausted, but the people on the other side still kept coming. And the place is at least 50 meters away from them. Once again, Natasha Romanoff touched the top of her trousers for other clips, but found nothing. Hawkeye's quiver was also empty of arrows. Damn it, I miscalculated. Natasha Romanoff looked remorseful. I thought Joker put most of it in the sewers down there. Hawkeye glanced at Natasha Romanoff, who was a bit self-blaming, and comforted softly. It's not your fault, no one would have thought that Joker could find so many people in just 1 month. While the 2 were talking behind the wall, a black man with a Joker mask came out. Black is the one who was next to Joker and ran back then. He only heard him say in a deep voice, "I know you are out of ammunition now, obediently put down your weapons and surrender." Natasha Romanoff nodded towards Hawkeye, and then the 2 smiled tacitly, and walked out from behind the wall with their hands raised. On the ground was a gun that had been emptied by the 2. "Joker wants to see you, don't play tricks." After speaking, 4 people who also wore Joker masks came over, and then took out 2 handcuffs with only thumb file size. These handcuffs are a little different from ordinary handcuffs. Ordinary handcuffs that lock the wrists can also be broken free by dislocation, but this kind of handcuffs, apart from getting the key, it is impossible to break free by oneself. Hawkeye subconsciously looked at Natasha Romanoff. If it's just ordinary handcuffs, they can be untied, but this kind of. If you wear it, it will really become a fish to be slaughtered. Natasha Romanoff shook her head imperceptibly at Hawkeye. The 2 had performed many missions together, and it took him a moment to understand what Natasha Romanoff meant. Do not move. Hawkeye chose to trust Natasha Romanoff unconditionally, so he didn't resist, let them put their hands behind their backs, and then locked 2 thumbs. The same goes for Natasha Romanoff. At this time, the black man wearing the Joker mask walked up to Hawkeye again. "Sorry, because Joker is just a common person, so we have to take some necessary measures." As he spoke, the black man took out a shot of anesthetic and injected it into Hawkeye's neck. The drug took effect, and Hawkeye passed out as soon as he rolled his eyes. Natasha Romanoff's head was covered with a black hood. Natasha Romanoff watched all this calmly, without any struggle. She knows very well that Joker is a person who likes to play. Since he likes to play, Joker must be a person who likes to formulate game rules. Although the 2 of them are now wearing such inescapable handcuffs, it means that Joker is interested in playing this game with them. At present, there is still 1 hour left before the firework feast that Joker mentioned. All the bombs in the blocks, residential buildings, and sewers within a radius of 2 kilometers from the Statue of Liberty have all been dismantled. Most of these bombs are 2 kilograms, and some are only a few hundred grams. Under the cover of the army, Daredevil at the moment has already come to the back of the Statue of Liberty alone, and climbed up to the position of the eyes with a climbing pick under the cover of the stone color on his back. Because the eyes are invisible, Daredevil's other senses are extremely sharp, and almost every step can fall in the right position. The blind stick was also carried behind Daredevil, and in a building facing the Statue of Liberty. Here you can see the whole picture of the Statue of Liberty clearly. Jin Bing made a drastic move and asked his subordinates to move a table to sit here. Behind them were Bullseye, Erica, and Penguin. In addition to these three people, there was a newcomer, a person with purple hair and purple skin. This person, code-named Purple Man, has the ability to control other people's thoughts, and is an extremely dangerous ability. I didn't expect such a lunatic to appear in New York recently. Looking at the Statue of Liberty 2 kilometers away, Jin couldn't help but speak. This time Joker's approach is almost equivalent to turning against the entire United States, and in Jinbin's intelligence system, almost all the agents that can be dispatched by the entire Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau are dispatched. How long is it until 12 o'clock? Jin turned his head and asked. The Penguin showed a flattering smile, then bowed his body slightly and said, Boss Jin Bin, there is still an hour before Joker's 12 o'clock. Jin Bin nodded and continued to watch after drinking a glass of wine. Regarding the firework of the century, I believe that there are not many people who do not want to witness this scene with their own eyes, even if the person who said this is a notorious criminal. The last 30 minutes of the firework of the century countdown. Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye finally came to the room of the left eye of the Statue of Liberty under the leadership of the Black Man. Both of you, strap this man to this bomb. Joker took a sip of the red wine and directed his subordinates. Because Natasha Romanoff can't see anything now, and the two thumbs behind her back are still locked with spare handcuffs, she doesn't dare to move lightly for a while. He could only let them pull Hawkeye away from him. At the same time, Natasha Romanoff's heart skipped a beat when she heard the word bomb. Suddenly, the explosion in the St. Lozoran church a month ago came to her mind. It is also a hostage with a bomb strapped to his body, and he also needs to make his own choice. Different places, different times, but the same plot. It's just that unlike a month ago, the hostages in the St. Lozoran church did not know each other. And she didn't need to put her life in it for an unfamiliar person, so she chose to protect herself in the first place. But this time the hostages were replaced. This time the hostage is Hawkeye, who has the best relationship with him in S.H.I.E.L.D. It is absolutely impossible for him to give up Hawkeye. Just as Natasha Romanoff was analyzing the countermeasures carefully, the Black Man planted Natasha Romanoff's headgear. The slightly harsh light made Natasha Romanoff squint her eyes. Natasha Romanoff subconsciously began to observe the surrounding environment. Here is a room of about 20 square meters. In the room, there is a table with a diameter of about 1 meter and a red lacquered bench. Joker is sitting on the red lacquered bench at the moment. In this room, except there are two people besides the bench, one white and one black. Behind the Joker is a huge firework that almost fills the entire room. The gaze continued to move, and Natasha Romanoff's gaze shrank suddenly. She saw Hawkeye at the moment, who had been shot, on top of a bomb that was half her height. Hawkeye sat on the ground with his head down and his eyelids drooping. At first glance, it was because the effect of the anesthesia needle had not expired. Seeing this scene, Natasha Romanoff suddenly struggled violently, but the severe pain from her thumb made Natasha Romanoff almost kneel on the ground in pain. Natasha Romanoff looked up, her eyes fixed on Joker. What exactly do you want? Joker wiped his hands gracefully with a tissue, then stood up from the chair, and walked slowly to Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff gritted his teeth and looked at Joker. Joker is a full 185 centimeters, while Natasha Romanoff is just over 1.7 meters. I do not want anything. The Joker stopped in front of Natasha Romanoff, and then suddenly said, I'm just a Joker. My favorite thing is playing games with other people. Otherwise, how about we play a game? How would you like to play? Joker laughed, then moved out of the way for Natasha Romanoff. See these fireworks behind me? I paid a lot of money to buy them, just for today. Joker pondered for a moment, then raised his head and took out a key. See? This key is the key of your handcuffs. I want you to unlock it within 10 minutes. As long as you unlock it, we can proceed to the next game. After talking about the game rule, Joker completely ignored Natasha Romanoff's murderous eyes, threw the key on the ground, sat down on the chair, and then poured himself a glass of red wine. You guys also appreciate how our lady agent will uncuff the handcuffs. Yes. The two spoke, and then stood behind Joker. Natasha Romanoff snorted coldly, leaned back, and fell to the ground suddenly. The Joker's attention is completely off Natasha Romanoff, and instead looks out the window. Natasha Romanoff leaned on the ground enduring the excruciating pain, and forcefully relied on the impact of the ground to dislocate the wrist of his left hand. At the same time, Natasha Romanoff also got the key. With the sound of click, the handcuffs on Natasha Romanoff's wrist immediately fell off. Iran and the black man were about to step forward, but were stopped by Joker's raised palm. Joker clapped his hands, making no secret of his praise for Natasha Romanoff. Behind is very good. Stop talking nonsense. What is the second level game? Natasha Romanoff held the key in her hand, and casually clicked twice on her dislocated wrist, and the wrist returned to its original shape. Natasha Romanoff watched Joker warily. Joker didn't answer Natasha Romanoff's words, but came behind Natasha Romanoff instead. From a height of 93 meters, you can almost see the night view of several blocks. Do you see the people below who look like ants? That's almost half of the people in New York. The Joker stood by the window, his back turned to Natasha Romanoff, defenseless. Natasha Romanoff lunged at Joker. Joker is just a common person, so he was quickly pushed by the window by Natasha Romanoff. Give me the key on the other handcuff, or I'll push you down from here. Natasha Romanoff held Joker's hands tightly, making sure he couldn't use any strength. Iran and the black two in the back were about to go up, but saw Natasha Romanoff turned her head and stared at them closely. One more step and I'll throw Joker out of here. Iran and the black two people were really afraid to move forward. At this time, the Joker by the window suddenly laughed, he, and Natasha Romanoff suddenly had a bad feeling. Really, you must be too impatient. Joker sighed helplessly, then pursed his scarlet lips and said slowly, I almost forgot to tell you, the detonators of all the bombs here are actually on me. Take it out. Natasha Romanoff spoke in a cold voice. Sorry, I can't do that. They're on my pacemaker right now, as long as my pulse stops. Joker pauses, then laughs twice. See the one with the Hawkeye on, is there a bomb? As long as I die, that bomb will go, boom, and send everyone here to the sky with the Statue of Liberty. Definitely, including you. Natasha Romanoff could only feel the unstoppable trembling all over her body. This guy is totally crazy. How about it? Do you want to try it? Otherwise, I'll let you see if it's true or not. Saying that, Joker twisted a few centimeters outward. Natasha Romanoff exerted force with his palm and pulled Joker back from the window, and Joker fell heavily to the ground. Natasha Romanoff did not continue to control Joker, because if Joker really connected the detonator to his own pulse, then whatever she is doing now is useless. If you play the game according to Joker's request, there may be a chance. Joker got up from the ground and patted his dusty clothes indifferently. What's the second game? Joker turned his head to look at Iran, and Iran said understandingly, there are still 10 minutes before zero. Joker shifted his gaze to Natasha Romanoff again. Did you hear that? The game of this level is very simple. Get the key before 12 o'clock, and then unlock the handcuffs for Hawkeye. After speaking, the black man took out another key. Natasha Romanoff didn't want to say anything now. She rushed towards the black man directly. Natasha Romanoff is worthy of being a 7th-level agent, knocked the black man to the ground with 3 punches and 2 kicks, and then took the key in his hand. Joker watched all this with cold eyes, and didn't clap his hands until Natasha Romanoff walked behind Hawkeye and opened the handcuffs for Hawkeye. You got the key faster than I expected. What should I do? Joker's brows were furrowed into a troubled expression. Originally, I only gave you 3 minutes for the last level, but now you got the key so quickly. What's the third level? Natasha Romanoff, standing next to Hawkeye, spoke. The content of the third level is even simpler. The bomb will explode in 10 minutes. You only need to rescue Hawkeye before it explodes. With that said, Joker continued to sit back on the seat. The black man on the ground struggled to get up, lowering his head to kiss Joker's shoe. Sorry. Joker kicked the black man over, and then said in a cold voice, you go and organize Natasha Romanoff to save Hawkeye, don't let me down again. Yes. The black man stood up quickly and flew towards Natasha Romanoff. But with just one face-to-face, the black man was knocked down on the ground, and then the black man continued to rush towards Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff's eyes showed a cold light, and he was about to kill him immediately. By the way, let me remind you, if the black man faints or dies, you will lose the game. Just when he was about to succeed, Joker reminded him. Natasha Romanoff could only abruptly change the direction of the hand knife that was slashing at the black man, and finally hit the black man's arm with a fatal blow without pain. The black body hit Natasha Romanoff with a muffled grunt, and then took several steps back. Because of Joker's rule, the black man interrupted Natasha Romanoff for 7 minutes. There are 3 minutes left before the explosion. Hawkeye's eyelids fluttered twice before waking up. Upon waking up, Hawkeye struggled nonstop. Natasha Romanoff hurriedly comforted. "Don't move, I can open it for you right away." Hawkeye calmed down as expected, and then asked, "What's going on?" "You were injected with anesthesia before, and now there are 3 minutes before the bomb explodes behind you. I need to save you in 3 minutes. I have opened your handcuffs, and Joker has installed the detonator. It goes off as soon as the pulse stops, so we can't kill the Joker." Natasha Romanoff explained the situation in a nutshell. Hawkeye turned his head slightly, and sure enough, he saw Joker and the other 2 people behind him. "Joker." Hawkeye gritted his teeth and said. "This gentleman knows me. It seems that I am still very famous now." Joker ignored Hawkeye's hateful gaze, looked at the time on Iren's watch, and said to Natasha Romanoff, "You have 1 minute left now, 59, 58, 57. The countdown in Joker's mouth was like a countdown from heaven, and all the New Yorkers underground shouted, 59, 58, 57. Natasha Romanoff's forehead is covered with cold sweat, and now Hawkeye has 2 layers of restraints on his clothes, which seems like a no-brainer. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared above the window. With a flip of his wrist, the figure jumped in from outside. "Where did you come from?" For the first time since Joker came to this world, an emotion called horror appeared in Joker's eyes. Daredevil didn't speak, but said, "Go and deal with Joker and the 3 of them, don't let Joker detonate the bomb, I'll help you untie it." Although Natasha Romanoff didn't know where Daredevil came from, he would definitely not be able to untie the 2 layers of restraint within a minute, so she rushed towards Joker immediately. Joker quickly raised his hand. "Don't worry, I won't do anything." Natasha Romanoff glanced at Joker, then immediately returned to Daredevil, jumping on top of the bomb. Natasha Romanoff has acquired a lot of bomb disposal knowledge during her 1-month stay in the hospital, so now she is more comfortable in dismantling bombs. Her fingers quickly removed the lead wires until there were 5 lead wires of the same color on the last layer. 30 seconds before the explosion time, seeing Natasha Romanoff stop, Joker finally stood up from his seat, and then said, "Only one of the 5 leads is correct. If you cut it wrong, it will explode directly. I don't know if you will how to choose." After speaking, Joker turned his attention to Daredevil again. "This. Huh. Mr. Superhero, I'm really curious how long you've been up there without even noticing me." Daredevil still ignored Joker and continued to undress Hawkeye. "Hurry up and leave me alone." Hawkeye's lips quivered, then he closed his eyes. "Don't be silly, we still have a chance." Natasha Romanoff gritted her teeth, then touched the necklace Hawkeye gave herself on her neck, which was a testimony of their friendship. There are still 20 seconds left. Daredevil also finally freed Hawkeye. Daredevil and Hawkeye quickly came to Natasha Romanoff. Matt couldn't see, so he could only ask, "What's the situation now?" Natasha Romanoff looked at Hawkeye's closed eyes, swallowed and said, "Now I'm on the last layer of the bomb, but this layer has 5 leads." Daredevil doesn't talk anymore, he's not very familiar with this. Hawkeye and Natasha Romanoff looked at each other, and Hawkeye suddenly said, "You take it apart. Even if you make a mistake, we won't blame you." Daredevil nodded. He had expected this situation a long time ago, but he just felt a little sorry for his girlfriend. Natasha Romanoff closed her eyes and cut directly on the first lead. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The voices of the New York citizens below became louder and louder. When the count reached 0, a voice suddenly rang out from the sky. Whoosh! 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 Blossoming huge amounts of firework appeared behind the Statue of Liberty. The bomb did not explode. All fireworks are composed of 2 big characters, Joker, in languages from all over the world. Yahoo! The fireworks sounded, and the crowd below became even more excited. Also, at the moment, there were several very nasty bombings in several places on the streets of New York. Natasha Romanoff calmed down, and the signal jammer was turned off at this time. Character completed. Bomb on the Statue of Liberty defused. Fury on the other side immediately asked, "Where are the Jokers?" "Joker?" Natasha Romanoff raised her head immediately, only to realize that Joker ran away while they were dismantling the bomb just now. "I'll go after it right away." After speaking, Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye immediately ran in the direction Joker left. But the 2 just went out. There was the sound of machine gun fire at the door. Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye looked at each other, and then quickly closed the door. Their expressions were ugly. "Joker is leaving. There is a heavy machine gun guarding the door to prevent us from leaving." Mom F***K. Nick Fury sat on the chair and cursed fiercely. "You are waiting for rescue in place." After speaking, Nick Fury hung up the phone. Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye turned their heads, only to realize that Daredevil had already left the window just as they were going out. The two looked at each other and smiled, then sat down on the bomb again with a little helplessness. What? Aren't you happy? Hawkeye looked at Natasha Romanoff and asked. Natasha Romanoff nodded. It's me again this time. I didn't expect Joker to run away while I was defusing the bomb. There are also my reasons. It would be great if I could wake up earlier. Hawkeye also sighed. Joker is too dangerous. We didn't catch him this time. He will definitely become harder to catch every time in the future. The base of the Goddess of Victory. Because Joker has Hydra, he naturally knows where they are, so Joker led the Hydra people behind him to bypass the agent who was still guarding below, and then left from another direction. Joker also shot black people before leaving. Those who have not completed the task are not worthy of appearing in his team. After a night of fermentation, almost everyone in the city was discussing Joker the next day. For a time, there was almost no one in New York who didn't know Joker. Unknown space. Beep, congratulations to the host, because Joker's actions have caused a large-scale impact in New York. The host has a special chance to draw a lottery. Do you want to draw a lottery immediately? Special lottery? What's the difference from the 100 summon point lottery? Special lottery draw. The host will get all the abilities of the drawn character. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and draw a lottery. Lin chuckled. If he gets Superman, he won't need any system at all. He can go out and rule the world now. Beep, is being summoned. In the light, a burly man appeared here. Beep. The summoning was successful. The character summoned this time is Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne? Hearing this name, Lin froze for a moment, and immediately turned his attention to the burly man in the light curtain. Batman's height is a full 188 centimeters, and the shoulders on both sides are ridiculously wide. His body is full of carefully crafted muscles that are as refined as steel. At the same time, Wayne at the moment is also wearing a suit of armor, which is the most common bat armor. In the previous life, many people were discussing one thing, that is, which one is better in technology, Batman or Iron Man, and Lin herself is actually very curious. Boss. Lin nodded and said to Batman, I'll send you out now. The only thing you have to do is not reveal my existence. Batman nodded solemnly. The light flashed, and Batman disappeared into the unknown space in an instant. 2 days later, in a newspaper office in Queens, New York. At the moment Bruce Wayne wore a pair of glasses, and his bat armor had already been replaced by a hand-cut suit. Bruce is the well-deserved richest man in the world in the DC world, so as soon as he came to this world, he began to ask who the richest man in the Marvel world is. When he heard that the richest man in the Marvel world was actually an arms dealer, he couldn't help showing a disappointed expression to this man named Tony Stark. Arms may indeed be very profitable, and even if Wayne wanted to make a lot of money in the DC world, he could even sell all the arms he manufactured to the gangsters. But he didn't. For one thing, he doesn't bother to do it. He's the Batman who keeps the peace, what he looks like, not some notorious arms dealer. On the other hand, as long as you can sell your company's products to the whole world, whether it is high-tech products or civilian products, it will definitely be a considerable profit. So he became the richest man in the DC world without relying on arms at all. Who's Bruce Wayne? It's your interview. A woman about 1.7 meters tall came out and asked in the corridor. It's me. Bruce recovered, then stood up and walked straight to the newspaper office. The name of the newspaper was the Daily Bugle, and the owner's name was a man named Jonathan James. Bruce has just arrived in this world, and it is a pretty good choice to learn about the world through news. So handsome. Several women in the newspaper office couldn't help showing nympho expressions when they looked at Bruce. Bruce went straight in with his resume. Inside, a man in his 50s, with his legs resting on the desk, was lying on a chair and smoking a cigarette leisurely. Mr. James, here is my resume. Bruce handed the resume to Jonathan, and then spoke. Jonathan stubbed out the cigarette in his hand, then took the resume, and after a casual glance, he was attracted by a line of words. You said in your resume that you are a person who likes to challenge yourself. Can you be assigned any task? Bruce nodded. That's right. That's great, you've been hired. I just have a task that no one wants to do. As long as you can complete this task, I'll give you $10,000. Jonathan said happily. Bruce sat on the seat calmly, then leaned forward slightly and said, What is the task? I wouldn't go if it wasn't challenging. Don't worry, this mission is definitely the most dangerous. Having said that, Jonathan quickly covered his mouth. Don't worry, I won't run away. Jonathan nodded, and could only continue to speak. Not long ago, someone discovered that Tony Stark appeared in a market in Afghanistan. Although it was just a shocking glimpse, he still took a photo. With that said, Jonathan handed the photo to Bruce. Bruce lowered his eyes, and then looked at the person on the photo. The man in the photo was a completely different person from the high-spirited Tony Stark he saw in Times Square. His hair is withered and yellow, and his face is full of gray and dark colors. It can be seen that he has experienced a lot of pain, and he may have been missing for more than a month, and he has not even taken a bath, and the ashes on his body may have scabbed. It's interesting that the famous Tony Stark has become what he is now. Bruce stroked his chin, then said with interest. Okay, I'll accept this task. Prepare the earliest flight ticket to Afghanistan. I'll go to the market where Tony Stark appeared to investigate. No problem. I'll directly prepare a first-class ticket for you, and there are $5,000 in travel expenses. Jonathan was afraid that Bruce would go back on his word, so he quickly offered the best terms. Bruce nodded and left Jonathan's office. As soon as he walked out of the office, several good-looking little girls came to Bruce's side. Have you been hired yet? Bruce nodded. That's great. We decided to form a patry tonight, do you want to join us? Bruce shook his head, and then said in a regretful tone, although I really want to have a drink with a young and beautiful girl like you, but Jonathan gave me an interview task, it seems that I can only have a drink together when I come back gone. Oh well. Several girls in the newspaper office all showed regretful expressions. Bruce, however, left the newspaper office without looking back after receiving $5,000 in a first-class ticket. After a hasty meal, Bruce bought a large suitcase, stuffed his battlesuit, some compressed biscuits and water into the suitcase, left New York, and set foot on the road to Afghanistan airplane. After flying for almost 4 hours, Bruce finally came to Afghanistan, which is full of Lois. The environment here is completely incomparable with New York, after all, it is in the midst of war all the year round. After getting off the airport, Bruce first came to the market where Tony had appeared before, and then rented a cheap rental house for a whole month with $100. The next thing to do is to wait. Now that Tony Stark has appeared once, it's hard not to guarantee that he won't appear a second time. After Bruce covered all the obvious white features on his body with clothes, and found a bank by the way to exchange all the US dollars on his body into Afghan currency, Bruce only did one thing every day, staring at the market. 1 day, 2 days, 5 days. A full 10 days passed, and just when Bruce himself doubted whether he should change his mind, Tony Stark suddenly appeared in front of Bruce. Bruce stood up quickly, and stared at Tony closely. There were at least 5 soldiers with live ammunition guarding him, and there was also a gray-haired old man beside Tony, who seemed to be a prisoner. It seems that that person should also be captured by these people. Bruce continued to stare at Tony, checking the surroundings for anyone hiding. After confirming that there was no one hiding, Bruce put on the battlesuit directly, and then covered his battlesuit with Afghan coarse clothes. Looks like they're leaving. After confirming that he had brought everything, Bruce went directly downstairs and secretly stuck a signal transmitter on their car. Then secretly followed these people to their base. No wonder I couldn't find it, it turned out to be hiding inside. Bruce walked more than 20 kilometers before finally arriving at the base of these people. It seems that these people are from different countries, and most of them are from Southeast Asia. And Bruce also discovered that although the man with the fat face was surrounded in the middle, the boss was actually the one standing outside and playing with the ring. Does that ring have any special meaning? Bruce's eyes narrowed slightly. There are at least 50 soldiers here. It is obviously unrealistic to fight indirectly from the outside, but maybe we can change our thinking. Bruce looked down, thinking. It didn't take long for Bruce to come up with a practical plan. Bruce hid in the corner, first took off the hood, and then used the Lois on the ground to smear a few on his face casually, and his clothes were also tattered, hiding the battlesuit inside. Then, Bruce rolled directly down the hillside like a refugee fleeing. Who? The leader's gun was aimed at Bruce in an instant. Don't shoot. Bruce quickly raised his hands, indicating that he has no weapons. The leader stood up full, put down the ring he was playing with, stared at Bruce closely, and then asked, "Who are you?" "I mean no harm. I just wanted to come here to travel, but I didn't want a station to happen in the place we visited. If you can send me back to New York, I can give you $1 million. Bruce fully expresses the arrogance and greed of the rich. When money was mentioned, the leader's face showed an expression of interest. Do you want to buy your life for $1 million? Then your life is really worthless. Let me ask you again, if I can send you back to New York, how much can you give me? Bruce looked at the black muzzle of the gun, his teeth trembling, and his legs began to tremble. 2 million, 3 million, 5 million. No, I'll give you $10 million. This is really the limit I can spend. Hearing Bruce's words, the leader finally nodded in satisfaction. $10 million, we will send you back to New York, definitely no problem. Then go back now, as long as you go back, I will use our company account to transfer the money to you, Bruce said quickly. The leader shook his head. We can send you back to New York, but not now. I want you to help me do something that is not dangerous. I have 2 criminals who have committed serious mistakes, so I want you to help me keep an eye on them. As soon as the time comes, I will send you back to New York. How about it? Bruce lowered his head and gritted his teeth. For the sake of $10 million, can't you really help me? No. Okay then, I'll help you see people. That's right. You will be their assistant in the future, and when the time comes, I will send you back to the United States. Saying that, 2 people pressed Bruce's shoulders from behind. Just like that, he led Bruce into the cave. $10 million. Ha ha ha. What is $10 million? After Tony Stark gives us his missile research, what is a mere $10 million? The leader played with the ring there, and then laughed happily. On the other side, Bruce was also thrown to the place where Tony and Ethan were making missiles. Hey, watch them for me, don't let them be lazy. If you find them lazy, call us immediately. Bruce shivered. I know, I will definitely take a good look at them. Inside the cave, the faces of Tony and Ethan, who were studying their first set of armor, all turned ugly. Fact. That guy actually sent someone to watch us. Didn't he say that no one wants to come? Tony looked at Ethan and asked in a low voice. Ethan shook his head, indicating that he didn't know either. Maybe we should talk. Seeing that those people had already left, Bruce didn't want to pretend anymore. He patted the dust off his body and sat down on the table where Tony was researching weapons. By the way, I'm not one of them, I'm just a kidnapped person, that's all. Damn, how did you hear that? Tony looked at Bruce in disbelief. Bruce didn't answer, but looked at the drawings on the table and stacked them together. Is it an iron robot? It's big, and it can stop bullets if you use those materials. I want to ask, what is his energy source? With that said, Bruce looked at the glowing reactor on Tony's chest. It's a good idea. Put the palladium element into this small box, and then use this small box to power your own mecha. It's just that in such a simple room and limited materials, how long can the energy in your chest last? What time? Tony and Ethan looked at each other. Tony looked at Bruce with an ugly face, and then asked, Who are you? It is absolutely impossible for someone in this kind of place to understand my drawings. Bruce stroked his chin. His burly body was half a head taller than Tony's. My name is Bruce Wayne, and I'm sort of a, well, tech buff. Bruce originally wanted to say that he was the chairman of the Bruce Group, but Bruce suddenly realized that he was no longer in Gotham, so he changed his words again. Science and technology enthusiasts. Are you kidding me? Even a PhD in mechanics may not be able to understand my stuff. Tony spoke in a tone of disbelief. To be honest, it's really quite simple. Bruce shrugged, and then picked up the blueprint. Your armor design is quite good, but there is one thing you need to pay attention to. Bruce took a pencil and drew a circle on the armor. You should make the part where the head connects with the neck smaller, otherwise it won't be able to protect it, and there may even be a gap. Tony looked at where Bruce had drawn, then nodded, indeed. Ethan looked at the two who were chatting enthusiastically, and touched his nose in embarrassment. How can he be considered a doctor? Why can't he understand the conversation of these two people? Ethan couldn't help but feel his self-confidence being frustrated. The two chatted for a while before Tony realized that this guy was sent by the group of people outside to monitor him, but what's the matter with him having a hot chat now? So Tony quickly distanced himself from him, and stared at Bruce with a pair of pliers. So you're going out and telling them? Bruce shook his head helplessly. I told you that I am not theirs anymore. Do you think those people can know what I just said? Really? Tony nodded. He did feel a little nervous. Will you also make battle armor? If you can, our deadline for manufacturing this set of armor will be fully advanced by 1 month. Bruce shook his head. You really underestimate me too. The most time-consuming part of making this battle armor is its tempering process. If you want to build a battle armor that can withstand bullets, you need at least 100 steel smelting. It just so happens that the most important thing I lack is strength. Don't worry about the work of building it to me, you two can assemble it. With that said, Bruce walked over and sat by the fire, then took out a hammer and began to pick up the dismantled iron and began to forge it. Unlike Tony's forging, Bruce's forging is very powerful. Tony and Ethan looked at Bruce in surprise. It was really hard to imagine what a powerful body was under his clothes. Soon, Bruce soaked the red iron block in cold water, and after it was completely cooled, he took it out with tongs and handed it to Tony. How do you look at this? Tony weighed the slap-sized iron block in his hand, and then showed a surprised expression. This is way better than the ones I've built before. How did you do that? As long as you are strong enough. Okay, pretend I didn't say it. Time passed day by day. Originally, Tony expected the armor to be built in 3 months. Now with the addition of Bruce, after solving the most difficult link, the speed has soared. The 3-month construction period was abruptly shortened to 1.5 months. And today, after Bruce handed Tony the last part, Tony couldn't help but start cheering. With it, we can leave here together. After we leave here, Bruce, Ethan, follow me to the Stark Group. How about I give you $10 million a year? Bruce smiled and said nothing. And Ethan also laughed, and said to Tony, then it's settled, after I leave here, I will follow you. Neither Bruce nor Tony noticed that Ethan's eyes had long since lost the will to survive, leaving nothing but numbness. Hurry up and put on your battlesuit, we'll leave when you're done. Tony nodded, then moved away from the monitoring range. Because the armor made of pure steel is too bulky, and the power system has not yet been loaded into the network, so now they need to leave the monitoring range to wear the battlesuit and load the system into the network. But in front of the surveillance, there are guards almost 24 hours a day. So when the three disappeared into the surveillance at the same time, the person in charge of the surveillance discovered it immediately. And Tony from at the moment has just started wearing the battlesuit, and now he can't move until the battlesuit is put on. Not only that, Bruce was still debugging the network for Tony with his laptop. Ethan stood aside and said resolutely, Bruce, help Tony connect the system to the network first, and I'll stop them. After finishing speaking, before the two could react, Ethan rushed out of the cave. Bruce immediately sped up the speed. Look, when this code reaches 100%, the network connection will be successful, and you will come out after it succeeds. I will help you stop them. After speaking, Bruce also rushed out, not forgetting to put the bat mask on his head. Unfortunately, it was still a step late when Bruce went out. Ethan was leaning against the wall not far away, dying, with dark red blood overflowing from the corner of his mouth. It looked like he had hurt his vitals. When the person at the door saw Batman appear, he immediately raised his gun and shot at Batman. Bruce snorted coldly. Now that Ethan is in danger, he doesn't have time to play with these people. So Bruce took out an anesthesia bomb directly from the battle armor, and threw it at the feet of everyone, and all the people passed out on the ground. Bruce quickly walked up to Ethan. Just at this moment, Tony also put on the Iron Man armor and came out. Bruce, how is Ethan? Seeing Ethan's appearance, Tony asked quickly. Bruce looked at Ethan and shook his head. The shrapnel hit Ethan's heart during the ejection process, and the heart was broken. Even the top surgeon in the world couldn't save it. How so? Tony took 2 steps back, clutching his chest in his battle armor. Then he hurriedly stepped forward and said to Ethan, Ethan, hold on, aren't you suitable for me to say? You still have to see your wife and children. But Ethan shook his head, showing a bleak smile. Tony, actually I lied to you. My wife and child died long ago, killed right in front of me. After saying these few words, the vitality in Ethan's eyes began to disappear, and his hands dropped. Ethan is dead, you can't sacrifice anymore. Let's break out first. Bruce nodded. Then the two rushed out of the cave together. The bullets hit the two of them as if they were desperate. Tony looked back at Bruce worriedly, only to find that his armor could also defend against bullets. Only then did Tony feel relieved, and walked ahead to fight back under the pressure of the artillery fire. Bruce's hands are full of things like smoke bombs, gas, and tear gas bombs, and the gun in his hand is also filled with bullets equipped with anesthetics, which will not kill people at all. The two rushed out like this. As soon as he reached the entrance of the cave, the leader took a bazooka and fired a missile at the two of them. Tony threw Bruce to the ground quickly. The huge explosion sound from the rocket launcher stirred up thick smoke and dust, temporarily blocking the sight of the leader outside. Bruce, are you okay? Tony stood up quickly and asked. Bruce shook his head, picked up a can of smoke bombs from his waist and threw it out. I remember that there should be a flight function on your armor, Bruce asked. Tony nodded. But now this function can only fly for about 10 minutes, and now the energy of the armor has been lost in the battle just now. Then fly. Bruce threw another flashbang and tear gas before grabbing Tony. Originally, the leader was very happy. If he killed Tony, he could get all kinds of advanced weapons provided by Obadiah. At that time, he might be able to become a king here. But a smoke bomb shattered the leader's dream. Before he could speak, the flash bomb suddenly burst into a strong flash of light on the soles of his feet, and the tear gas made him kneel on the ground, covering his eyes in pain. He just felt as if his eyes had been pricked by needles. Outside the cave, Tony and Bruce flew into the sky and disappeared in a blink of an eye. When Tony was leaving, the missile installed in the armor also fired towards the missile weapon on the ground. Under the collision of gunpowder, all the weapons with mass destruction and Stark Industry were blown up. Tony took Bruce and the two to fly in the sky wantonly. Haha, as expected of my battle armor, I feel that I can fly even higher. Tony yelled happily at Bruce. Damn it, The fuel for that shitty thing of yours can only fly for 10 minutes, did you forget? Put me down. It's only just taken off now, it's still 10 minutes away. After speaking, Tony had to control the armor to continue to fly upwards. All of a sudden, the warframe completely lost power, and then flew forward in a free fall motion towards the desert below. Damn it, listen to me, take off your armor now. Take off? How to take off? Tony asked subconsciously. I put a one-click detachment function on your armor, it's on your right hand, come on. We're about to hit the ground. Tony hastily tapped his right hand, and sure enough a button was pressed. The armor immediately began to fall off piece by piece. Bruce let go of Tony's hand, and then opened the parachute carried on the armor. Just as Tony was about to fall, Bruce grabbed Tony again. Cool. Did you develop this yourself? Bruce nodded. I have many sets of armor besides this armor, unfortunately. Having said that, Bruce didn't continue to speak, but changed the subject instead. Is your big guy going to stay here? Aren't you afraid of being picked up by someone with a heart? There was a smile on the corner of Tony's mouth. Since they want it, let them take it. With that said, Tony patted his chest. Without the reactor, they can't even activate the armor. My technology is at least 10 years ahead of the world. Bruce looked down. When he saw Tony say this, his face was full of pride. Okay, it's on the ground. When they were still 2 or 3 meters away from the ground, Bruce reminded him, and then threw Tony on the ground. Can't you remind me in advance when you want to throw it? Tony rolled several times after being thrown on the ground, then stood up and said angrily. After landing on the ground, Bruce removed the parachute, shrugged and said, Didn't I remind you? Is that what you call a reminder? Tony's face was full of indignation. How long will your people be here? Bruce didn't pick up the topic, but changed the subject instead. Don't worry, they couldn't find me before because there was a signal jammer in that valley. Now that we have left the valley, I believe they have received the message, Tony said confidently. By the way, do you want to go back with me? Bruce nodded. I'm new here, I have nowhere to go, and I just need a place where I can do experiments. There are many places where there are geniuses like you. No problem. I have several houses in New York, and you can choose one at will. As for what you want, you can directly ask Jarvis to help purchase, and all the bills will be charged to my account. Tony said proudly. He, Tony Stark, lacks everything except money. I won't be polite if you really need it. While the two were chatting, huge amounts of roars came from the sky. A gunship helicopter appeared in the distance. Tony quickly waved his hand in the direction of the helicopter. Hey, I'm here. Bruce was wearing a black battlesuit, standing next to Tony, and he didn't even take off the hood. The helicopter stopped at a distance of more than 20 meters from the two of them, and then docked on the desert. A somewhat skinny black helicopter jumped out of the helicopter before it even stopped. Tony, are you okay? Damn it, I've been looking for you here for 2 whole months. After talking a lot, the black man finally saw Bruce standing next to Tony, and asked with some doubts, He is my savior Bruce, without him, I wouldn't have escaped so soon. Tony said lightly. Bruce, this is my good friend Rhodes, a colonel in the military. The two reached out and shook hands. By the way, is my private jet ready? I haven't showered in a month, and those damned mercenaries don't even have a place to shower. Don't worry, everything is ready. Speaking of this, Rhodes said helplessly, because you disappeared for nearly 2 months, the airport needs you to pay for the maintenance of your private jet fee. Just swipe my card, don't tell me about these trivial matters. The three of them boarded the plane. After boarding the plane, Tony's head tilted and he fell asleep in his seat, and the loud roar of the helicopter didn't even bother Tony. Watching Tony fall asleep, Rhodes' smiling face gradually faded, and then he said solemnly to Bruce, Bruce, I think we need to talk. Bruce glanced at Tony, who was sleeping, and nodded. No problem, what do you want to talk about? Rhodes straightened his body, sat on the chair, and then took out a recording pen. First question, how did you meet Tony? Bruce shrugged. I'm working in a newspaper now. Didn't there be a photo of Tony here before? Then I wanted to come here to try my luck, but I didn't expect to be found by me. It's that simple? Rhodes stared suspiciously at the mask on Bruce's face. Strength is sometimes a part of luck. Rhodes nodded without questioning Bruce. Then the second question, how did you escape with Tony? I'm taking Tony. Bruce asked suspiciously. Rhodes nodded. Bruce shook his head quickly. Definitely not. In fact, Tony built a suit of armor while he was caught, and I'm just a blacksmith. Really? Rhodes' eyes lit up immediately, and he was about to send the driver back to the place where Tony and Bruce had just been picked up. Bruce stopped him quickly. Manipulating a battle armor requires energy, and only Tony can do energy in the world now. In Tony's words, his current technology is at least 10 years ahead of the entire world. Hearing what Bruce said, Rhodes sighed. I wouldn't believe it if someone else said that, but if this person is Tony, I really believe it. But it's a pity that you two can escape from the siege of dozens of people. It's a very powerful armor. It's just a pity. I know Tony. He will never hand over the technology to us for such a powerful weapon. At most, he will let us purchase it from him after mass production. Rhodes had already begun to fantasize about driving the mecha to run wild among the enemy groups in the future. After all, as the matchmaker between the military and Tony, why don't I get a set of armor for myself to play with? After a long time, Rhodes recovered from the smirk, coughed and continued. The last question, can you take off the mask and let me see it? For this question, Bruce shook his head and refused. Want him to take off his mask? What a joke. Fine. It doesn't matter if you don't want to take it off. Rhodes shrugged. I'm just curious about your appearance. What about the black battlesuit on you? Did Tony design it for you? No, I designed this myself. Rhodes nodded, then turned off the recorder and said, okay, I have no problem now. Hearing what Rhodes said, Bruce closed his eyes tiredly. He has been doing the forging work for the past 10 days, so his body is also very tired now. Seeing Bruce's appearance, Rhodes also tactfully did not continue to speak. Both Bruce and Tony were woken up by the roaring overhead. We're at the airport now. Tony, your private jet is parked there. No one has touched it except for routine maintenance. Ron spoke loudly to Tony. Tony nodded, but didn't speak. He'd just woken up, and Tony felt a little sick to his stomach at the roaring noise in his head. Tony shifted his gaze to Bruce again. There was not even a slight wave in the corner of Bruce Black's mouth under his bat mask. Finally, the helicopter landed. After Tony stumbled off the plane, he lay on the ground and vomited indistinctly. All the tourists in the airport looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. They even thought they were mistaken. This ragged, tasteless guy was Tony Stark, who had disappeared for 2 months. Isn't Tony Stark always personable and suave? Why did he look like this when he reappeared? Rhodes smiled and handed Tony a bottle of water. I guess tomorrow's news headlines should be that Tony Stark suddenly appeared at the airport after disappearing for 2 months, and then vomited all over the floor in a very unmannered manner. Tony took the water and rinsed his mouth, and then he said, whatever they say, I still need your help. In the cave I was in before, there was a scientist named Ethan. I died, and I want you to go and bring back his body. Rhodes nodded. Leave it to me. Not only that, I will ask them for an explanation if you are missing here. I can rest assured that. Tony stood up, put his arms around Bruce's shoulders and said, let's go. I'll take you to see my stewardess team on the plane, and I'll let you see what real heaven is. With that said, the two walked towards the plane together. Correct. Tony turned his head and looked at Rhodes. You prepare some cheeseburgers for me, and let Pepper hold a press conference for me. I want to announce a big event about the Stark Group. Okay. I'll help you contact Pepper. 4 hours later, Tony's private plane flew back to New York from Afghanistan. The skies of New York and Afghanistan are like two worlds. Tony had a small party on the plane, and Tony and Bruce were having a crazy time. What Tony didn't expect was that Bruce looked thick-eyed, but he didn't expect that he could play better than himself. This can't help but make Tony even more curious about Bruce's identity. You know, Bruce said something before. He's new here. There are several explanations for new arrivals. He just came to America? He just came to Earth? He just came into this world. Coupled with his skillful technique, it not only made Tony more curious about Bruce's identity. But Bruce didn't care at all. After getting on the private jet, he found a room and changed into a suit, and then he looked like a playboy and walked around among the flight attendants with ease. After the war, Bruce changed into a new suit. The two sat in front of the plane window and each drank a glass of red wine. To be honest, I'm really curious now. You're even better than me. Tony gave Bruce a thumbs up. Bruce responded with a smile. I don't have many interests, but this matter happens to be my interest. How can you beat me in this regard? Tony shrugged. You're right, but I've decided to change my ways. Correct evil and return to righteousness. How can it be so easy? Bruce smiled wryly, as if recalling some bad memory. By the way, Tony, why did you want to hold a press conference just after you came back? If it were me, I would definitely have fun for a few days before thinking about other things. How many days are you having fun? Tony shook his head. I'm the chairman of the Stark Group, and I have a lot of things to do. And because of my disappearance, I guess the stock of the Stark Group has fallen to the bottom, and the old guys in the group probably won't let me play for a few days. Maybe they'll be waiting for me when we get off the plane. Speaking of this, Tony said mysteriously, but this time, I'm afraid they won't be able to do what they want. I don't know how my whereabouts were revealed, but the people who know my whereabouts are those in our group. So this once, I have to give them a big surprise." Bruce looked up after looking down for a moment. Then, looking into Tony's eyes, he said word by word, "If I'm right, you probably want to shut down the weapons manufacturing department of Stark Industries." Tony was taken aback by Bruce's words, and then said excitedly, "My God, you're such a genius. How did you guess that?" Bruce curled his lips in disdain. "Is this hard to guess? I can see that although we are playing, your emotions are not very high along the way, and I even feel a little depressed, and I have seen the words Stark Group on the weapons of those who kidnapped you before, and even Ethan died under the weapon you made." Speaking of this, Bruce sighed. It's just a pity that Ethan didn't escape. The atmosphere between the two was also a bit depressed. In the end, it was Bruce who patted Tony on the shoulder, and then said, "The decedent is gone, let's look forward. And Ethan may have already had death intentions on the day his family died. Under such circumstances, no one can save him at all." Tony nodded heavily, and the last bit of hesitation in his eyes disappeared because of Bruce's words. "I've decided. I'm going to have a press conference as soon as I get off the plane. Do you want to come with me?" Bruce hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Forget it. I'm not interested in showing up in front of so many people." "Don't say that. It's absolutely impossible for you as my friend to hide. Those ubiquitous paparazzi will definitely pull your underwear off. If you want to hide your identity, you might as well come with me openly." Tony saw through Bruce's thoughts at a glance, and then persuaded him. "All right then." Bruce thought for a moment, then said, "Perhaps you are right. If I appeared in front of the stage in a playboy manner, I might be able to hide my identity better." Only then did Tony happily take a sip of red wine and said, "That's right, why hide it?" Bruce smiled helplessly. In Gotham before crossing, Bruce has been carefully hiding his identity as Batman. "I am afraid that after my identity is exposed, I will be retaliated by those criminals and local gangs. And in a place like Gotham that is deeply attracted by darkness, Bruce can't change anything even if he reveals his identity. Maybe I should really make some changes." Bruce lowered his head, the thought popping into his head. After the plane stopped, Tony and Bruce got off the plane less than 20 meters away. Bruce voluntarily stepped aside. Tony in a suit was immediately overwhelmed by the swarm of reporters. "Tony Stark, all of us are curious about what happened to you during the 2 months you disappeared. Tony Stark, can you tell us why you didn't show up when Stark Group's stock price plummeted during the 2 months you disappeared? Tony Stark, there are rumors that you were kidnapped in Afghanistan for more than a month, that's why you didn't respond. Is this true?" Questions came one after another, and Bruce, who was watching from behind, hurriedly hid himself. Seeing this, Tony pulled Bruce in front of him, then hugged Bruce's shoulder affectionately and said, "This is my good brother Bruce Wayne, and he is also one of the people who saved me. You can ask him any questions you have." The frenzied reporters immediately blocked Bruce. A rare embarrassment appeared on Bruce's face, but he quickly reacted, and immediately began to deal with the reporters' questions with ease. Tony saw that the number of reporters here decreased a lot, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Tony." Just then Pepper Potts walked in among the reporters with Happy and Obadiah and a group of directors from the Stark Group. Tony turned his head and spotted the large group of directors. He has now been identified, and only the members of the board of directors know his whereabouts. Rhodes as his friend, and his subordinates are all carefully selected by the military to go to Afghanistan with him. Pepper and Happy are both his confidants, and it is even more impossible for him to betray him. So now the only people who are likely to betray him are these directors of Stark Group. But who it is, he still needs further confirmation. A group of directors came over. Pepper and Happy stood behind Tony. Obadiah smiled and stretched out his hand, and said with some regret, "Tony, you are finally back." Tony laughed a few times, then shook hands with Obadiah. "Yeah, I didn't expect that this trip to Afghanistan would be delayed for so long." As for the other directors, Tony also dealt with it casually. These directors only became shareholders by purchasing shares in his Stark Group. At the beginning, Tony directly sold 20% of the shares of Stark Group when he was young and energetic, and he made himself the richest man in the world. But now, Tony still owns a full 70% of the shares, Obadiah alone owns 15%, and the rest of the shareholders together only own 15% of the stock. By the way, Tony, who is he? Obadiah set his sights on Bruce, who dealt with all kinds of questions from the reporters with ease. "He is my savior." "The savior? I'll give him $1 million to let him go. The news of your return should have allowed you to enjoy being in the spotlight, but you're about to be split in half by that person." With that said, Obadiah was about to walk towards Bruce. But Tony grabbed Obadiah's shoulder tightly, even making Obadiah, who had been in a high position for a long time, feel pain. Fact, Tony. What are you doing? Put your hands away. Tony stared at Obadiah closely, and then said in a cold voice, Stan, you are a partner in the Stark Group founded by my father, and I have always treated you as my uncle. But I don't want you to treat me friends pointing fingers. Obadiah couldn't believe what Tony said. Unbelievably, he pointed his finger at Bruce, who was still talking there, and asked, just because of this person, are you talking to me like this? Tony didn't speak, but turned to look at Pepper and Happy. Pepper. I asked you to contact the people at the press conference on the phone. Where are they now? Most of them are already waiting at the Stark building, and a small number of them came to the airport directly after getting news from nowhere. Tony nodded, then looked at Happy. Happy, you go to the store where I eat most often and buy one. Why don't you buy 2 cheeseburgers? I want to see them when I arrive at the entrance of the Stark building. Happy nodded and drove away in the Rolls-Royce. Tony walked over, grabbed Bruce by the arm and pulled him away from the group of reporters. Bruce, let's go to the press conference first. I'll treat you to my favorite cheeseburger. Get in the car. After finishing speaking, Tony said to the reporters again, if you still want to know more, please come to the Stark building immediately, and I will announce an important news there. After speaking, Tony took Bruce into his car. Pepper, you drive. I'm in the back seat with Bruce. Pepper nodded and sat in the cab. After the three got into the car, Tony asked, Bruce, how do you feel? Bruce shrugged. That's it. Except for some discomfort at the beginning, I feel fine. After all, this kind of thing is much easier than fighting wits and courage with those criminals. Real or fake? Tony said in surprise. I thought I was the only one who wouldn't be afraid in front of so many cameras. I didn't expect you to be too. Bruce responded with some helplessness. Back when he was in Gotham, those reporters were not as crazy as they are now. For now, it's just a small fight. Tony, if you really announce the closure of the Stark Group's arms department, guess how much the Stark Group's stock will drop? Bruce glanced at the little Pepper in front of him who was concentrating on driving, and then said loudly on purpose. I guess. Tony was about to speak when Pepper's extended car slipped on the ground. Pepper. My problem, my hand slipped on the steering wheel. Tony sighed helplessly, and then said to Pepper, isn't it just to close the weapons manufacturing department and not sell weapons to the outside world? Why are you so excited? Tony, do you really know what it means to shut down the company's arms manufacturing department? Little Pepper held the steering wheel tightly and asked. Definitely no. After all, most of Stark Group's weapons are independently developed by me. And I guess that Stark's stock price may drop by about 40% in a short period of time after I announce it. All the stocks in the stock market will be withdrawn, and then we will see if those shareholders want to sell their stocks. Tony decided the fate of those small shareholders and retail investors in a few words. And isn't it just money? He, Tony Stark, lacks everything except money. This incident also made Tony understand how terrible the consequences of letting people he doesn't know about his trip. So Tony decided to remove all minority shareholders from the company. Not only that, but if possible, he wanted to give Obadiah enough money to spend his old age peacefully, and to recover all the stocks in Obadiah's hands. This is not Tony's imagination. You know, among Stark's directors, apart from Tony, the largest shareholder is Obadiah Stine. In this case, if something happens to Tony, Obadiah is very likely to take all of Tony's shares directly. After all, Tony's parents are dead and he has no relatives. Actually, I think it's a good thing to close it, after all you. With that said, Bruce glanced at Pepper in front of him. Tony smiled. Don't worry. Pepper is my confidant. In the Stark Group, the latest people I trust are him and Happy. Bruce nodded and apologized to Pepper. Sorry, for some reasons, I have to confirm safety. I don't mind. Pepper smiled. Thanks. Bruce thanked Pepper, then turned his head and said to Tony, you have mastered all the manufacturing techniques of the armor now, are you going to make it? Tony nodded. Definitely, I'm thinking clearly now. I'm different from you. Your physical fitness is very strong. Speaking of this, Tony glanced at the burly Bruce with some envy. I'm sure that even without armor, it's not a problem for you to fight 5 of those Marine guys one by one. But I'm different, I'm just a common man now. You also know that I was just attacked by a group of terrorists. As a result, I was imprisoned for nearly 2 months without even resisting ability. If it weren't for you, I probably would have stayed there at least 1 month. So I think I can use my technology to create a set of armor that can make me a superhero. At that time, as long as I hold a high-profile press conference and announce to the world that I am a superhero, then the stock of Stark Group will definitely exceed what it is now. Bruce closed his eyes and thought for a moment. It is indeed a very good plan. Having said all that, Tony said with a smile, well, I have already told you my plan. You can buy the shares of Stark Group at the lowest price, and then directly become Stark director of the group. Don't you feel tempted? Not moved. Bruce said, his tone full of determination. I may really want to borrow some money from you to short the stocks in the hands of those retail investors, but I won't ask you for a share of Stark Industries. Oh? Tony was a little curious. You really don't want it? Even if I give it to you for nothing? Bruce shook his head. I will use the money from shorting stocks to create a company called Wayne Group. Aren't you afraid that I won't lend you money by saying that? Tony laughed twice. Then are you such a person? How can it be? Tony snorted, then tapped Bruce on the shoulder playfully. The last thing I need is money. Tony would have given Bruce a few $1,000,000 to distance himself from him if Bruce was hiding his thoughts, but Bruce wasn't one of those guys at all. Tony discovered in the cave before that Bruce is actually a non-killer. He was wearing a very thin battle armor, which could withstand bullets, but there was not even a single thing in it that could kill people. Tony was getting more and more shocked. Some of Bruce's very creative ideas can't even be thought of by him as the richest man in the world. At the same time, Tony silently remembered a name in his heart, Wayne Group. When he goes back, he must ask Jarvis to check whether there is such a company as Wayne Group. Just now Tony deliberately exposed Bruce to the media, and found that the handling was much better than he imagined. Not only did he not say anything, but it also allowed Tony and Bruce to escape smoothly. And Bruce's business ideas, and even some things even Tony can't figure it out. And the bat armor that Bruce is wearing, which is similar to his clothes, can withstand bullets. Either of these surprised Tony. While the two were chatting, the Stark building arrived. Tony pulled Bruce out of the car, and took the 2 burgers from Happy, who had been waiting. He handed one over to Bruce. Trust me, this is definitely the best burger you'll ever eat in your life. Seeing Bruce's hamburger, Tony unpacked it and started to eat it. Just watch me perform from the audience. Saying that, several people walked towards the inside of the Stark building together. At this time, Obadiah and the directors of the board of directors were late. Obadiah glanced at the tall and burly Bruce, then hurriedly walked in Tony's direction. Bruce didn't care, and after walking in, he found a random place behind a group of journalists and sat down. When Tony saw this scene, he smiled. Hee. After taking a bite of the burger, he took off the microphone and put it near his mouth, and then sat down in a very disfigured manner. It seems like I haven't had a press conference like this for a long time. Tony's first sentence made many reporters laugh out loud, and Obadiah and the directors behind him narrowed their eyes. They seem to have seen that the stock has soared all the way after Tony came back, and their worth can also double their value. It's just that this time I'm afraid they will be disappointed. The situation this time is the same as what you have heard. I was kidnapped in a dark cave. Those damned kidnappers used my weapons to kidnap me for 2 full months. Do you think it's absurd? Before the reporter could answer, Tony continued to speak. Also, during the time I was imprisoned, I thought about a lot of things, and he also made me see clearly the future direction of our Stark Group. I saw with my own eyes that the weapons I made in the Stark Group's weapons manufacturing department, the bullets hit our compatriots one by one. Having said that, Tony shifted his gaze to the members of the board of directors, and then said loudly, So, I have decided. Starting today, the Stark Group will close the weapons manufacturing department, and all weapons will be under centralized supervision, and no one is allowed to sell weapons privately. After speaking, Tony took another big mouthful of the burger. As soon as these words came out, everyone on the board of directors was shocked. You know, the most profitable place for Stark is the weapon manufacturing department. At least 60% of the money is earned by the weapon manufacturing department every year. What Tony said at the press conference was equivalent to breaking his own 2 arms. So Obadiah quickly grabbed the microphone in Tony's hand, and said without thinking about the image, Everyone, Tony just came back now, you should focus on Tony instead of those meaningless words. But the reporters present are all smart people, how could they not be able to tell what is important and what is not? So no one paid attention to Obadiah, and everyone just looked at Tony, who was sitting on the ground in a disfigured way, eating a cheeseburger, hoping that he would give them some hot news. But Tony smiled. These are enough for you to make a lot of money. If you don't leave, I won't call you at the next press conference. Hearing this, the reporters hurried away. For a while, only Bruce in the corner remained. Obadiah looked at Tony angrily. Tony Stark, the Stark Group is not just your company. We also have shares in it. So what? Tony ate his burger without looking up. So I think you should discuss this decision with us instead of issuing the final order directly. After swallowing the burger with difficulty, Tony said with a sarcasm on his face, Is it useful? Hearing what Tony said, Obadiah said coldly, I own 15% of the shares of Stark Group, and the other members of the board of directors behind me also own 15% of the shares of Stark Industries. Together, we own 15% of Stark Industries, 30% of the Stark Group. The directors behind Obadiah also echoed. What's the use? Tony's face was full of disdain. I alone own 70% of the shares. If I didn't show mercy and didn't take back the shares in your hands, do you think you can still stand here? You have also made a lot of money these years. I don't know who among you betrayed me, but don't get caught by me. Tony finally finished eating the whole cheeseburger and stood up slowly. I earned all of your money, and you just bought a little bit more when I sold Stark Corporation stock. If any of you want to be with Obadiah, I don't mind putting you all clear out. Obadiah's face was ugly. He didn't expect that Tony Stark, who regarded himself as an uncle since childhood, would speak to himself in such a tone. How dare he? Suddenly, as if remembering something, Obadiah turned his gaze to Bruce, who was standing bored watching the farce. It is because of him. Obadiah strings everything together. If Tony came back alone, even if he really doubted himself, he would never break up with him in public. It didn't do Tony any favors. But what if a person with a high force value is added? Even if he broke up with himself, Tony can not only remove himself from the board of directors, but even forcefully use the one-vote veto power that owns more than 51% of the stock to force the acquisition of his own stock. And even if he finds someone to assassinate Tony afterwards, with Bruce's existence, he will never succeed, and he will even leave Tony with a handle. What a good calculation. Obadiah gritted his back molars, his eyes fixed on Bruce. After a long time, Obadiah smiled again, and said to Tony with a smile, "How could we go against your will? After all, you brought us to make money together. It's better that way." Tony sneered, then turned to Obadiah. Obadiah and all members of the board left the Stark building. As soon as he walked out of Stark's building, a director quickly said, "Obadiah, do we really want Stark to be so willful?" Obadiah slapped the director directly, and then said, "What are you thinking? Tony owns 70% of the company's shares. 70%, do you know what this means? As long as he is ruthless, he can directly slap us all kicked out. I don't care what you thought before, I'll accept all your thoughts now. I'll talk about anything when I come back." After speaking, Obadiah asked the driver to park the car downstairs in the Stark building, then sat in the back and drove away. Only a group of directors were left looking at each other. "How is it? My acting is not bad." Seeing the directors leave, Tony laughed. Bruce nodded. "Tony's approach is really neat and perfect, there is nothing to say. But I feel that you still have to be careful about that Obadiah. After all, he doesn't look very friendly at you," Bruce reminded. Tony cast a disdainful glance at the Stark building. "He has half a foot in the coffin. If he really doesn't want to enjoy his old age, then I can just satisfy him. It just so happens that Stark Group's pension can be paid less. Let's go. I'll take you back to my home in New York, and I'll introduce you to the most satisfying work I've invented in my life." Because Pepper was Tony's secretary, Tony handed over almost all the affairs of the Stark Group to her. So just after the press conference, Pepper left almost non-stop. "Let's go." Tony laughed, and led Bruce to the underground garage. This is an underground garage that belongs exclusively to Tony, where he collects almost all the tens of millions of sports cars in the world. "Choose one at random, how about we compare?" Tony raised an eyebrow and spoke defiantly at Bruce. Bruce sneered, and the corner of his mouth curled up. "Are you sure you want to play drag racing with me? Believe me, competing with me is the worst decision you'll ever make in your life." Tony didn't believe it at all, and directly expressed his determination with actions. He walked directly into a Koenigsegg worth 40 million. Seeing this, Bruce stepped into a McLaren. Tony whistled at Bruce. "Are you sure you want to compare the V8 McLaren to my V10 Koenigsegg? Why not?" While speaking, the door of the basement opened, the two looked at each other, stepped on the accelerator and rushed out. The two cars increased their speed to more than 120 miles per hour almost simultaneously, and then sprinted on the streets of New York. Both sides come and go, neither will let the other. Because Koenigsegg's engine uses a V10 engine, which is more powerful than McLaren's engine, McLaren was left behind by Tony as soon as he left the garage. Tony glanced at Bruce, who was trying to catch up in the rearview mirror, and couldn't help stretching out a hand to provoke Bruce. Bruce saw this scene and shook his head with a smile. If he also chooses a car with a V10 engine, it would be too much to bully Tony. From Stark Mansion to Tony's villa has to pass through an urban area of New York, and there are a lot of cars in the urban area of New York, so when entering the urban area, Tony involuntarily slowed down a little. Seeing this, Bruce stepped on the accelerator and overtook Tony in an instant. Seeing that Bruce passed him, Tony was not to be outdone, and slowly increased his speed. Damn rich people, this is the downtown area, not your playground. Bruce looked at Koenigsegg in the rearview mirror, then made a provocative gesture to Tony, and rushed out with full horsepower, and Tony couldn't even see the back of his head in an instant. Fact. When Tony drove the Koenigsegg back to his home, Bruce was half-closed eyes waiting for Tony to come back. Tony got out of the car, and tapped on Bruce's window angrily. Why are your driving skills so good? Don't you need to slow down in the urban area? Where did you learn your skills? Tell me, as much as you want. As soon as Bruce opened the door, Tony asked a series of questions. Bruce yawned and shook his head helplessly. Don't even think about it. I can't do it for ordinary people. Besides, sports cars are just for children. Tanks, airplanes, even aircraft carriers, as long as I know how to operate them, I can drive them. Damn it, you're such a pervert. Tony couldn't help but curse. He didn't suspect that Bruce would lie to him at all. A character like him doesn't bother to deceive others. Bruce shrugged, then pulled out the car keys to return to Tony. Tony didn't go to pick it up, and said a little depressed, "This damn McLaren is given to you. I really didn't expect that one day I would lose in drag racing." Bruce put the key in his trouser pocket directly, and said indifferently, "Okay, I just need a temporary means of transportation. After I build my car, I won't have to drive so slowly." Slow? This car can reach a top speed of 300 yards per hour, Tony looked disbelieving. I know. Tony was silenced when he heard Bruce's answer. Do people say? But immediately, Tony changed his face and said with a smile, "Then can you give me one after you build the car?" "It's expensive," Bruce said to Tony. "Money is not a problem." "That's no problem. I'll give you a fully equipped version." Bruce nodded, then changed the subject and said, "Aren't you going to take me to see the most proud invention of your life? Let's go." Tony nodded, then stood at the door and said, "Jarvis, open the door." As soon as the voice fell, the door of the villa opened automatically from the inside. This is a large villa built in the suburbs of New York, with a total area of more than 10,000 square meters. The two drove for a long time before finally formally seeing Tony's villa. "Let's go. I'll take you to see Jarvis, he's right below." Bruce nodded, and walked down with Tony. As for how much does the villa cost? How luxurious it is, to be honest, Bruce himself doesn't care at all. He used to be an ascetic monk in a cave. Every day, several people huddled together in a dilapidated small house, and lived in the cave with Tony and Ethan for half a month. It should be hiding in a dark corner. Jarvis is on the basement floor of this villa, and Tony took Bruce to the basement floor. The empty basement of thousands of square meters is filled with all kinds of high-tech machinery. There are even several test stands. "Jarvis, this is my friend Bruce, say hello," Tony said. "Hi Bruce, my name is Jarvis." Seeing this miraculous scene, Bruce was indeed a little surprised, turned his head and asked Tony, "Can he think?" Tony nodded proudly. "Definitely. If it's just a robot that will perform tasks mechanically according to the commands I set, then he can't be called the greatest invention at all." Bruce narrowed his eyes and nodded. His dark mind was at work again. "You know this is real artificial intelligence. This kind of thing, if one is not careful, may destroy human beings. Except for some very few tribes, the current world basically relies on the internet to survive. If there is an artificial intelligence that can think freely, then it means that nothing needs to be said at all." While Bruce was silently looking at the Jarvis in front of him, Tony was still talking about Jarvis. Bruce cut him off mercilessly. "You know what it means to have an artificial intelligence that can think freely?" Tony froze for a moment, but after thinking about it for a while, he understood what Bruce meant. Tony smiled. "I know what you mean, Bruce. But you don't have to worry about this problem at all. I have set up a lowest level program for the hub of Jarvis." With that said, Tony swiped lightly on the virtual light curtain, and a line of characters appeared in front of Bruce. It is unavoidable to harm or persecute human beings in any form. All instructions of Jarvis are executed based on this underlying logic. It's just that Bruce doesn't know that Tony has a deeper logic under this underlying logic, which is also applied to the future Ultron. Hearing Tony's words, Bruce nodded in satisfaction. If there is such an underlying logic, it is indeed a guarantee. "By the way, can I borrow here for a few days?" Bruce asked. With the blessing of the equipment inside, he can not only make the Batmobile faster, but even the battlesuit can be upgraded simply. Who knew that Tony was like a cat that had been stepped on by a mouse? "No. I have already prepared a villa for you in New York, not far from this villa. Don't even think about living in my villa is only for girls I like." Fine. Bruce didn't care either. Unknown space. Because Bruce appeared at the New York airport and became Tony Stark's savior directly, so now Bruce is also a small fire in New York. Brings Lynn a primary call. Lynn waved her hand, and then used the system to start summoning. Beep, is being summoned. Successful summoning, the character summoned this time is. Beep. The summoning was successful, this time the summoning character is Alfred Pennyworth. The next moment, a white-haired old man walked out of the light curtain. Lynn glanced at him uninterestedly, and then said, Bruce is in New York now, go find him. Yes. The Queen. Inside a Hydra base. At the moment's Joker was looking at Bruce Wayne on TV with excitement, and let out a sharp, piercing laugh. Without Batman, playing with those guys who have no brains and only brute force is not fun at all, and I even worry about accidentally killing them. Now that Batman is here, I can finally play with peace of mind. Joker's body was trembling with excitement, even his eyes turned red, and the two scars that were already scary at the corners of his mouth became even more terrifying. Behind Joker are dozens of Hydra agents. The current Joker is because of his outstanding performance in the Statue of Liberty, and because of several groups of brainwashing personnel sent by Pierce and the Bald Agent. Under the influence of Joker, all the brainwashers rebelled. Joker also logically became the captain of an agent team. But it's not time to turn his face, Joker heard from one of his agents. Now Pierce and the Bald Agent in Hydra are not considered the top characters. The Hydra agent in S.H.I.E.L.D. is someone else, and in the dark, there is someone with a metal arm who has been brainwashed from the last century. Brainwashing? This Joker is simply too good at it. Joker is now waiting for someone who can get in touch with the person with the metal arm, and then brainwash him directly into his subordinates. No way, now Joker has brainwashed some agents, but these agents are still within the scope of common people. And Joker checked a lot of Hydra's internal materials during this period of time, and discovered many secrets of this world. For example, there is a place called Xavier Academy for Gifted Youth in Westchester County, New York State. Most of the people there are people with super abilities. In the research of Hydra, those people have more Y-type chromosomes in their bodies than the common people. According to the expert judgment of Hydra, that may be the truth that those people with super abilities have super abilities. For this reason, Hydra calls those people mutants. Not only that, I heard that there is a supercomputer inside Hydra, and this computer even originally exceeds the one in the Bureau of Black Widow and Hawkeye. I really can't imagine. I thought Hydra was just a small terrorist organization, but I didn't expect it to be such a huge monster. Joker shook his head, and looked at Bruce, who was full of smiling faces on the TV. The changes after I came to this world will soon become beyond your imagination, so what about you? Bruce Wayne. There are so many high-tech in this world, don't let me down. Saying that, Joker couldn't help laughing strangely again. Joker, Pierce's call. Just as Joker was laughing strangely, an agent outside ran in with a phone in his hand. Joker picked up the phone and asked, "What's the matter?" Pierce was silent for a moment, and then said, "Did you see the news of Tony Stark's return on the news?" "I definitely saw it. After all, Tony Stark is a famous big shot all over the world." Joker moved his gaze to the TV, but he didn't see the Tony Stark who took up most of his face, but moved his gaze to Bruce in the corner of the video. "That's good, since you saw it, I have a task for you now." "What mission?" Joker asked. Hydra's intelligence personnel found out that the terrorist organization that kidnapped Tony is called 10 Rings, and their leader is now in Los Angeles. Obadiah Stine, the second largest shareholder of the Stark Group, gave us a very considerable sum for the reward. Let us send some people to protect him. Originally, Joker was not going to take this task, but suddenly heard the name of Obadiah Stine. So Joker suddenly became interested. "No problem, I have accepted this task." Pierce on the other end of the phone nodded in satisfaction. "The meeting time is going down today, and the place is table 37 in the cafe of the Bank of Manhattan. I think you should be familiar with that place." Hey, that's definitely it." Joker laughed twice, and then asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" "There is none left." Joker hung up the phone directly. Then he lowered his head and began to meditate. He wants to play games again, this time against his old nemesis Batman. But how should Obadiah Stine be used? He has to think about this matter carefully. After all, Batman wasn't one of the brute force guys at the Strategic Homeland Defense Logistics and Offensive Assurance Agency. After finishing the phone call, Joker sat down alone on the spot. It wasn't until the afternoon that Joker stood up unsteadily with the support of the surrounding agents. He strode forward directly, not paying any attention to the numbness in his calf. "You all stay here for training, you won't be needed for this afternoon's affairs." Joker turned his head and said coldly, and then left the Hydra base. Because half a month ago, Joker invited people all over New York to watch a firework at the Statue of Liberty, so now many people are keen to imitate Joker. So when Joker appeared with his own makeup, it didn't cause an uproar. Wow, look at that guy. His Joker makeup is so similar, it doesn't look like acting. Yes, this hostility, I reject him as the real Joker. How is it possible? Joker should not dare to come out now. Discussions were constantly coming from all directions, but Joker ignored them at all. After taking the subway from Queens, Joker went straight to the coffee shop opposite the Bank of Manhattan, and glanced at the Bank of Manhattan as he entered. The Bank of Manhattan also became tighter after being robbed once by Joker. A security door was placed at the door, and the number of security guards guarding the door directly changed from 2 to 8. If there is no certain armed force, I am afraid that it is really not so easy to break through. Joker, wearing a purple suit and messy hair, pushed open the door of the cafe, and went straight to table 37 and sat down. At the moment Obadiah was fidgeting at table 37, and was taken aback by Joker, who suddenly sat on his seat. He was originally just a person with Joker makeup, and he was about to yell at him, but he was directly frightened by Joker's fierce eyes. So, Obadiah stammered and said, "Are you really the real Joker?" Joker raised his head to look at Obadiah, brushed his messy hair by the way, and sat there quietly without speaking. Seeing Joker's appearance, Obadiah couldn't help cursing inwardly. Fuck. Those people in Hydra are simply lunatics. They let this kind of people protect me. Do they want our lives? Mr. Joker, actually, I don't think I need the protection of someone as powerful as you. They are just a group of terrorists. Hydra just send me some agents. Obadiah's head was covered with cold sweat. Joker suddenly laughed at this time, and then said, "I know Bruce Wayne." What? Obadiah didn't react for a while, but when he came back to his senses, he suddenly thought of the man next to Tony, as if Tony called him Bruce. Is this the guy Joker was talking about? Obadiah knew that the reason why Tony was so stubborn in front of so many directors was Bruce. He almost asked his staff to find all the resources, but he only found out that Bruce appeared in New York half a month ago, and then applied for the Daily Bugle. It's just the reporter. He didn't find anything else. It was precisely because of this that Obadiah was a little afraid of this mysterious Bruce. He didn't dare to come out of his house to meet them until now that the people from the 10 Rings terrorist organization came to Los Angeles. Actually, I think the relationship between us is simply a relationship of hiring and being hired. Joker raised his feet and crossed his legs, then changed his comfortable position and leaned on the sofa. You don't have to be afraid of me. You give me money, and I will help you with things. It's very simple, isn't it? Obadiah nodded quickly, and then asked cautiously, "I want to take advantage of the darkness to meet the 10 Rings tonight, and then forge evidence that I have been at home. Is that okay?" "Definitely no problem. We just need to find someone who is about your height and build." "That's great." Obadiah nodded, and then asked again, "Mr. Joker, are you familiar with that Bruce Wayne?" There was a sinister smile on the corner of Joker's mouth, and then he pretended to grit his teeth and said, "Definitely familiar. He is my old friend." Joker also deliberately emphasized the words "old friend," so that Obadiah could hear it more clearly. Obadiah was even more satisfied now, so he said directly, "Then can you help me deal with that man named Bruce?" "Don't worry, Tony will deal with it." Joker showed a hesitation expression. "Bruce is very powerful, he has a battlesuit that can resist bullets, and his strength is also terrifying." Hearing Joker's words, Obadiah became more and more disappointed. But after Joker finished speaking, he finally said, "Add money. This is simply like mountains and rivers with no way out, and another village with dark willows and bright flowers." So Obadiah immediately said, "No problem, as long as you can help me block Bruce, money is not a problem. $100 million. Obadiah was a little surprised by Joker's lion's big mouth, but thinking of how he would get all the shares of the Stark Group and become the chairman of the Stark Group if he killed Tony in the future, he gritted his teeth and said directly, "As long as it can help me get Bruce Wayne, $100 million is absolutely fine." Business is done. Joker waved to the waiter and asked him to serve him a cup of coffee. After getting the coffee, Joker drank it with it. "Mr. Obadiah, now that we've finished talking about our private affairs, let's discuss our actions tonight. I will go to Los Angeles with you, and at the same time I will send a team of Hydra primary agents. Each of them is equipped with the most sophisticated weapons. You just need to tell me how many of them there are." Obadiah nodded. This terrorist organization is just a small organization. Although there are rumors that the leader of the 10 Rings is actually another subordinate named 10 Rings, but I have never seen any 10 Rings. As far as I know, there are more than 50 of them in total, and all the large weapons have been blown up by Tony. Most of them are rifles and pistols produced by the Stark Group in their hands. Their mission this time is to transport Tony's suit in the desert to Los Angeles. The reason why I called you here this time is because I am afraid that they will jump over the wall in a hurry. Joker took a sip of coffee, and then laughed, hee hee, twice. I'm afraid that they are not only afraid that they will jump over the wall in a hurry, but also plan to kill people to silence them. Otherwise, Hydra will not be allowed to act. Obadiah nodded. As long as these people are dead, Tony will be dead. If there is no problem, I will go back and apply for a flight path now, and take off to Los Angeles in my private jet at night. Okay. Where is your private jet now? I just call and let them pass. In one of my villas. The location is 037 Times Square. Joker nodded and dialed the phone. Take 20 people and gather at 037 Times Square. After speaking, Joker put down the phone. Let's go to your villa. Obadiah nodded, then called his driver to drive the car to the gate, and took Joker in the direction of Times Square. Along the way, Obadiah kept on the phone, and finally used the status of a minority shareholder of Stark Group to get a route from New York to Los Angeles. When the driver drove Obadiah and Joker to Villa 037, there were already 20 fully armed agents standing there waiting. Joker was the first to open the car door and walk down, as if he was the owner of the place. Obadiah's face was ugly, but he could only dare not speak out. After all, Joker is a complete lunatic, and when dealing with Bruce later, he will need Joker. How? Are these people enough to deal with the 10 rings? Obadiah nodded again and again. It must be enough. They can't compare with these people. Looking at these heavily armed and arrogant soldiers behind Joker, Obadiah showed envy. Thanks to the Stark Group, he is really rich. But no matter how much he invested, he couldn't attract such a person. That's why Obadiah can only cooperate with Hydra. At 7 p.m., Obadiah fed the Jokers and the others before boarding a plane to Los Angeles. About an hour later, the plane landed at Los Angeles Airport. Together with Obadiah's 2 bodyguards, a total of 24 people drove 4 bulletproof vehicles to the place they agreed in advance. After arriving at the place, Joker didn't get out of the car. Obadiah walked in the front, followed by 22 heavily armed soldiers. After seeing the leader of the 10 rings, he first opened his arms and hugged the leader fiercely, and then said, "Laja, long time no see. Have you brought me what I want?" Raza nodded, then looked behind Obadiah. "Why did you bring so many people here?" Obadiah laughed. "They are all my personal bodyguards. You know I have a lot of money, but I'm afraid of death." Raza nodded and did not continue to pursue it, and led Obadiah to a tent. Inside is a huge iron lump with a height of 2.5 meters. It looks very good. What a combination of violence and aesthetics. Obadiah touched the big man obsessively, then turned to look at Raza, his eyes full of killing intent. Raza himself is still unaware of the danger coming. He suggested, "Otherwise, you just leave this machine here, and I promise to build you something twice as big as this guy." After speaking, he didn't forget to touch the ring in his hand. "Forget it. You can't even make a missile yourself, and you want to help me build this high-tech?" Obadiah sneered. "What do you mean?" Raza finally heard the killing intent in Obadiah's words. Turning his head, he saw a black muzzle pointing at him. "Don't kill me, I can give you as." Before Raza could finish his sentence, Obadiah shot him between the eyebrows. The agents outside heard the gunshots and fired at the mercenaries one by one. Caught off guard, all the mercenaries were wiped out. After the gunfire stopped, Joker finally opened the car door and got out. Joker ignored the corpses all over the floor, and walked directly towards the tent where Obadiah entered at the end. At the moment Obadiah was looking at the huge amounts of iron lump with a full face, and said in his mouth, "This is really beautiful." Seeing Joker coming in, Obadiah quickly blocked it, then gave Joker a space with a smile. Joker just glanced at it disdainfully. "Don't worry, I won't take this thing from you." After speaking, Joker walked up to Raza and squatted down. He came in for Raza. "You know, there is nothing hanging in the air in this world." He has seen the 10 Rings organization in Hydra's intelligence. It is a terrorist organization active around the world, and it can be regarded as a considerable force. Joker turned Raza's body upside down, looking for something. Finally, Joker found a strangely shaped ring on Raza's left thumb. Joker pulled it out a few times, but found that it didn't come off. So he directly cut off Raza's finger with a knife, then took out the ring and threw the severed finger on the ground. Obadiah watched the scene with horror on his face. Joker picked up the ring and nodded in satisfaction, and then said, "Okay, I've got what I want. By the way, let me remind you one last thing, you can't beat Bruce with just this thing." With that said, Joker left the tent and returned to the car. Sitting in the co-pilot seat, he carefully polished the ring. The surface of this ring is golden yellow, and there is a ring-shaped circular pattern on the front, which seems to have no special effect. After playing with it, Joker put the ring in his pocket. Then when Obadiah came back, he took the huge amounts of things and left Los Angeles, leaving only corpses all over the floor. New York. Next to Tony's villa. This is where Tony lent Bruce to live. It was already evening. Bruce was also looking online for things he might use. Now this home is just a simple residence, not like Tony's villa at all. There is a place to research and improve the armor. Now Bruce only has the basic version of the battlesuit he wore when he was summoned by Lynn, nothing else. So he is now eager to start research, but, well, if only Alfred were here now, then I wouldn't have to worry so much. Bruce sat on the chair and stared at the computer, then rubbed his eyes helplessly. Alfred is to Bruce what Jarvis is to Alfred. Without Alfred, he has too many things to worry about. At this moment, there was a knock on the door suddenly. Bruce came to the door with some helplessness, and then shouted towards the door. Tony, let's talk about something tomorrow, I'm a little sleepy now. Master, it's me. A familiar voice appeared in Bruce's ears, and Bruce opened the door quickly. I saw a person that Bruce thought about day and night appeared in front of him. Alfred, are you here too? Bruce asked excitedly. Alfred nodded. Didn't you accept an interview today? That interview made you popular in New York, and then the boss summoned me. Very good. Bruce quickly brought Alfredella into the villa, and then said, Alfred, do you think it is possible for us to establish the Wayne Group in this world? The corner of Alfred's mouth curled up, and then he said confidently, definitely no problem. Although there may be some difficulties in the early stage, the trading environment here is much better than Gotham. As long as I'm given enough time, I'm sure that the Wayne Group will appear in this world. That's great. Bruce nodded quickly. Recently, after Tony returned, he announced that the Stark Group would cancel the weapon manufacturing department. Now the Stark Group's stock has plummeted, and many retail investors are selling their stocks. I'm going to borrow some money from Tony tomorrow. 9 times out and 13 times out. Then use this opportunity to save up the initial funds. As long as you have a good start, the next thing will be much easier. That's great. Alfred was also very happy. With this money, our early funding problems will be solved. Then I will analyze the world's currency system, and then I can start making money. And the other side. Tony stayed up all night. Jarvis, what do you know about Bruce Wayne? Jarvis paused for a while, and then said, there are 170 people named Bruce Wayne in the world, but I didn't find any information about your friend on the internet. Only half a month ago, he was in a company called the Application Information in the Clarion Daily newspaper. The previous information is all blank. Is that really the case? Hearing the news, Tony lowered his head and pondered. Jarvis, look for the company Wayne Group again. There isn't any company in the world called Wayne Group. Tony nodded, sitting in front of Iron Man's first model. His eyes were broken, he didn't know what he was thinking. It's a newcomer to this world, it's really a newcomer.